The ABC is in damage control tonight, launching an investigation of its own reporting and deleting an online video that depicted Australian soldiers firing on unarmed Afghan civilians. Channel 7 Spotlight revealing the clip's audio was doctored with extra gunshots added in.
Hi, I'm Janine Perrott. Welcome to Media Watch and to a shocker of a week for the ABC. One that began with the charge of a serious journalistic crime and ended with the managing director forced to announce an independent inquiry into the whole debacle. An inquiry prompted by new evidence uncovered by Media Watch, which, incredibly, the ABC had all along. The headline's as damaging as the initial allegations.
Fake footage, the ABC's latest humiliation involving Heston Russell.
Heston Russell demands meeting with Kim Williams amid doctored footage allegations. Former Australian commando Heston Russell is well known to the ABC. Last year, he successfully sued the broadcaster for defamation over a series of separate stories by reporters Mark Willesee and Josh Robertson that accused his platoon of shooting a hog-tied prisoner because they couldn't fit him on the chopper. Russell was awarded $390,000 in damages and hefty legal costs. And now he's back with more ammunition in his pursuit of the ABC and Mark Willesee, this time over a different war crimes allegation. And while Russell and his platoon were not named in the story, he believes he was the target.
A decorated Australian commando caught in the crosshairs.
They made it sound like I was a mass murderer.
Of the ABC.
It's accusing Special Forces soldiers of being war criminals.
And Seven's central and most damaging charge is explosive.
They've literally added extra gunshots.
That's phenomenal. So
I fell off my chair when I saw this.
The helmet cam vision comes from a Black Hawk helicopter on a 2012 mission in Afghanistan and formed part of a two-night special investigation that was broadcast on 7:30 2 years ago.
Tonight, we look at new allegations against soldiers from the country's other Special Forces unit, the 2nd Commando Regiment.
One of those allegations was that Australian soldiers may have breached the rules of war, with Mark Willesee reporting.
We don't have the vision that comes immediately before this, but this Australian soldier is firing towards what appear to be unarmed civilians in residential compounds.
A version of the 7:30 story was also posted online along with several short videos. And it is one of those videos that Russell says was enhanced with additional gunshots. And to prove it, he gave Seven the original chopper footage to compare.
It's a warning shot. Then Heston's command to shoot. Followed by 6 shots. Revealing an astonishing difference between the source vision and the version of events told by the ABC's Mark Willesee, which starts with 6 rounds of firing. Then the single warning shot becomes 6.
Seven then tightened the screws by taking the tape to a forensic audio engineer, and his verdict was damning.
It completely misrepresents what those soldiers were going through that day.
When the ABC was confronted with the doctoring claims, it took the video down and blamed it on an editing error, telling Seven,
"The ABC is seeking more information on how this occurred. Joe Pacini, Mark Willesee and Josh Robertson had no role in the production and editing of the online video you have brought to our attention."
And in further comments to Media Watch today, the ABC strongly defended its star reporter.
Mark Willesee categorically denies any allegation that he directed or authorised any change to the audio in his story. To suggest otherwise is false.
The ABC says it was unaware of the gunshot issue until Spotlight ran its story 8 days ago, with news director Justin Stevens telling the Melbourne Press Club on Tuesday,
"Just last week it was brought to our attention by Channel 7 that a video clip in an online story from 2 years ago had an error. A preliminary inspection suggests a section of audio was incorrectly edited."
Stevens might not have known, but some in the ABC certainly did. And how do we know that? Because as Media Watch discovered, Heston Russell's lawyer sent a letter to the ABC's legal department in November 2022 raising concerns and saying of the online video,
"Multiple rounds can be heard being fired from the weapon. Can you please explain the above discrepancies in the helicopter footage?"
But that wasn't the only concern. Rebecca Giles' letter goes on to also raise questions about the 7:30 broadcast of Mark Willisey's special investigation.
A similar discrepancy arises in relation to another segment shown on the 7:30 story. The audio of the further helicopter footage appears to have been edited to add additional rounds.
So that's two pieces of vision that have been called into question, the online clip and the 7:30 broadcast, with Seven's Chris Reason asking Russell,
how many shots did you count there?
It's about 11 or 12.
Now alleging another case of added gunfire audio in a 7:30 report on Australian war crimes allegations in Afghanistan.
They're digging themselves a deeper hole because there's been many edits made to sensationalise this story.
So how did the Giles letter about additional gunshots and manipulated audio not trigger alarm bells? And why didn't ABC lawyers notify the news division or the reporters behind the story and ask them to look into it? On Friday, Media Watch alerted the ABC to the letter and asked if it was ignored. And that did send the alarm bells ringing, because 6 hours later, Managing Director David Anderson was suddenly announcing an independent review of the
online and broadcast story to fully understand what has occurred and make any necessary recommendations.
Adding he was removing the story until further notice and admitting that he was unaware of the Giles legal letter.
Regrettably, at no point was this letter or the information in the letter disseminated to ABC News.
With few details yet on the review and scant coverage on the ABC itself, we posed our own questions and received answers this morning. Among other things, they have confirmed that the review will also look at the claims of former DEA agent Brett Hamilton, who says he was taken out of context in the 7:30 story. And on the embarrassing issue of the missed legal warning, the ABC says
it was not ignored, but information in the letter was, innocently, overlooked.
That's why we think it's critical this independent review will take in ABC News and the legal department, both key players in the defamation case against Russell that backfired so badly and ended up costing the ABC around $2.8 million. Hopefully, a full external inquiry will not only provide answers, but also some accountability. Because this hasn't just cost the ABC plenty of money, but also its trusted reputation. Now to the ghosting of local journalism.
Australian community media cuts dozens of editorial jobs from newspapers, including the Canberra Times and Illawarra Mercury.
ACM to fold 8 more newspapers.
Australian Community Media, or ACM, owns 70-plus mastheads across regional Australia, and these latest cuts will see at least 35 jobs axed. And in its flagship paper, it wasn't afraid to point the finger at Meta and the government, with one ACM journalist telling Crikey,
"Resources have been cut right to the bone already. There's this motto the executive leadership team keeps regurgitating, do less with less, which doesn't marry up with them asking us to continue driving subscriptions with less staff."
And that's the impossible challenge facing all print media, but it's especially acute in smaller regional papers where readership has declined, ad revenue evaporated and costs keep rising, which is why ACM also is killing the presses on 8 of its New South Wales mastheads last week, on top of another 2 last month, with some, like the Tenterfield Star and Blaney Chronicle, making it clear who's to blame.
Government in action killed your newspaper.
The state and federal Labor governments could have helped save this paper. Instead, they did nothing.
ACM is furious that its demand for a greater share of government advertising was ignored, and its managing director, Tony Kendall, was upfront about what this means for some communities.
Sadly, local reporting won't exist in those areas. When a big story breaks in one of those particular towns, we'll obviously cover it from one of the nearest papers we've got, but there will be no local people on the ground.
And that's already happening. Take the Bunbury Mail, one of 4 ACM papers in southwest WA, which stopped printing last year. What's become of its website? Well, last week, the top stories were homophobic assaults on dating apps in Perth, bushfire threat in Carnarvon, a 10-hour drive north, and the charging of an inner Sydney gang founder. In fact, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's not a single headline that mentions Bunbury. It's a classic example of what's become known as a ghost newspaper, or as researcher Gary Dixon explains,
ghost newspapers is a term that describes news outlets that appear to be present in a community but which have been whittled away until they functionally no longer exist.
Dozens of newspapers have suffered this fate in the past 5 years, and as the biggest player left in regional print media, ACM is the chief culprit.
In a few cases, their owners have invested in bringing them back to life. Others have been purchased by independent media companies and restored, but the majority wither away until they're formally shut down.
And that's what's happening at ACM's Mount Isa paper, the North West Star. 4 years ago, ACM stopped printing, leaving behind a website but no local reporters and few local stories, with rival journalist Matt Nichols saying,
I wouldn't class it as a newspaper. They don't have any local journalists on the ground. They don't print a newspaper. Yeah, they're not producing any real original content at all.
So Matt started his own local paper, the North West Weekly, to fill the void.
It's a huge area, covers about the same size as Victoria, and there wasn't a newspaper.
A similar story is playing out in Moree, where retired journalist Bill Poulis has also launched a local paper, the Moree Online News. And he's got no time for the ACM-owned rival paper, taking aim at its rehashed government announcements on its front page. Or in this case, word for word from a press release. With Bill Poulis telling Media Watch,
I can't work out why a company as big as ACM, with a strong supply of journalists, can't fill a 16 or 24-page weekly newspaper with interesting local stories. We've published more than 150 online stories in less than a month, and we're basically a one-man show.
So why does community media keep these so-called ghost news websites ticking over? Advertising, of course, even if it's only a trickle. We asked ACM why it bothers with local mastheads that don't employ local journalists and don't cover the community they're supposed to serve. It told us,
ACM is proud of its journalists and the work they do every day to keep regional Australians informed. We have a business to run, the ABC has taxpayer dollars to spend, and we have no further comment.
Still, the strategy seems to be working for ACM co-owner Anthony Catalano, who bought the former Fairfax papers 5 years ago for $115 million.
Ex-Domain boss Anthony Catalano hatches plans for $55 million Byron Bay trophy home.
So let's save our sympathy for the many unemployed ACM journos rather than the man known as the Cat, who seems to always land on his feet. And finally, to a high-stakes family drama.
Rupert Murdoch has kicked off a real-life episode of Succession, entering a Nevada courtroom to ensure the future of his media empire.
Yes, like any happy family, Rupert is taking the kids to court. But why?
The patriarch is trying to lock out his other children, leaving son Lachlan in charge of the Murdoch family business.
Yes, 93-year-old Rupert wants to control the company from beyond the grave and give Lachlan, who's more conservative than his three siblings, sole control over the media empire when he dies. The shock legal move by their father, an attempt to freeze them out of an equal share in what should be an irrevocable family trust. And it appears to have united an outraged Elizabeth, Prudence and James on one side against Rupert and his favoured heir on another. And proving he still has a sense of humour, he's called the case Project Harmony. But everyone in the media is simply calling it
a real-life succession battle.
A real-life succession?
Just like the TV hit Succession.
The plan is that I take over from Dad. I think I'm the best option.
But unlike that fictional TV drama, or even the current 3-part ABC Australian story on Lachlan, this episode won't be played out before the camera.
The family that ironically tells us the news about everything else in the world, but tells us nothing about themselves.
Yes. So with the Nevada court closed to the media, the pesky press has little to play with beyond headlines about the real-life succession. Standoff, showdown, drama, thriller. Or how about
legit IRL succession.
Not that you'll see much about it in the Murdoch media, with barely a whisper in News Corp's Australian or British outlets. Well, it's not like the tabloids would do a sensational story on a 5-times married billionaire in his 90s, fighting his warring family for control of his powerful right-wing global media empire. Nah, nothing to see there. And that's all from us tonight. You can read statements from the ABC and ACM on our website. Don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, until next week, goodbye.